have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup.
And happy May Day, comrades. We are taping on May 1st, but by the time you have seen this, Rhode Island should have opened marriage to same-sex couples.
And as you certainly know by now, because we're stuck talking mostly about the reaction rather than the actual news, for the first time, one of the Big Four professional team sports of the male variety has a member who has come out.
Stay tuned to find out.
Yeah.
San Francisco Pride is embroiled in a controversy over extending and then withdrawing an invitation to Bradley Manning to be a grand marshal of the parade this year.
Stay tuned for our rants on this subject. In good news, Philadelphia has passed a very strong transgender and sexual orientation rights bill, as does Vermont. The
New York State Assembly has, for the 6th time, passed the transgender rights bill for the state, but the fate is up in the air in the state Senate.
For the 6th time. There has been some really ugly newspaper coverage of a brutal murder in Ohio of a transgender woman, and there's some outrage about that.
Marriage equality loses in Colombia and Northern Ireland.
That's the real headline. A big AIDS vaccine trial has been halted because it's not working. We'll give you the details.
And I'm going to review a couple of plays, including Alec Baldwin in Orphans, an all-star cast including Cicely Tyson in The Trip to Bountiful, and a new play by the author of Cock called Bull. Get it? Cock and Bull. Okay.
We're going to start with marriage news because you already know about Jared Collins. We'll get to him.
Rhode Island has passed its same-sex marriage bill, and we're waiting for the governor's signature at this point.
No. As we tape, what's actually happening is the House passed it, the Senate passed it, but the Senate version was slightly different, so it had to go back to the House, where the committee has passed it, and tomorrow, as we're taping, the House should pass it again.
How did that religious exemption thing do?
I don't know what the final version is, but I think some of the adjustments have to do with
Anyway, if all comes together, the marriages there should begin on August the 1st. The Senate vote was 26-12, and it would make Rhode Island the 10th state in this country to open marriage to same-sex couples, along with the District of Columbia.
And the Democratic Senate president, the woman who had announced she was against the bill but let it go through the Senate anyway, did vote against it. I applaud her for letting it go forward as opposed to the John Boehner school of ruling, which blocks stuff.
Yes.
Even when it has a majority. And probably quickly to follow on the heels of Rhode Island is Delaware, where their marriage bill should pass a Senate committee this week and go on to the governor for signature. It's after it passes the full Senate. It is expected to pass the committee. It's expected to be a little tougher in the Senate, but I think once it has the momentum of going through the committee, and it's already passed the other house of the legislature, things are looking pretty good. And that would make the entire eastern seaboard from Maine to the District of Columbia, except Pennsylvania and New Jersey, open to same-sex marriage.
Yeah.
And I think New Jersey will follow pretty soon, too.
Right. Now, talked about a lot of legislation that's been introduced in the Congress, but they're not going to reintroduce the DOMA bill, the DOMA repeal bill.
Respect for marriage bill.
Yes. They're going to hold off until the court decision in June from the Supreme Court on DOMA. Which in some ways makes sense because you want to see what you're actually going to have to legislate about, but There it is.
Well, it also, you know, we're hopeful that the Supreme Court will strike down Section 3 of DOMA, and so that would be an easier fix, but it leaves Section 2 intact, which is the section that tells the states they don't have to recognize.
They don't have to respect all marriages.
Exactly, or the laws passed in other states. This may also affect the immigration bill because the talk is, you know, it's interesting how suddenly you get all these stories about, oh, it's the gays holding up the immigration bill. It's such an orchestrated move. By which side, who knows? But suddenly, across the board, all major news sources are suddenly saying this will be the fly in the ointment, trying to put the gays into the immigration bill.
We were taken out of the bill. And again, the amazing thing about this country...
Well, we were never put in the bill.
Well, the amazing thing about this country is that in most countries, the first thing they do for gay couples is they recognize foreign partners and they let them in. That's the first thing they do before they do marriage, domestic partnership, anything. In this country, it seems like it's going to be the last thing they're going to do. Now, Senator Leahy of Vermont has promised to introduce an amendment in the Senate committee to put it in there. The Republicans are saying that's going to tank the bill.
Right.
Senator Schumer, our senator, who's supposed to be liberal, but we know better, but he's part of the Gang of Eight, which has been negotiating all this. He just keeps saying no comment about this. And the Catholic bishops have announced we would reconsider our support for the bill if you put the gays in.
You thought the Catholic Church, the one thing they stood for was immigrants and poor people. No, not when we're involved. But again, I think what the liberals, what Schumer really wants is for us to step aside and say, again, this will be taken care of when the Supreme Court declares DOMA unconstitutional. The federal government will then be free to include recognized same-sex marriages.
What's the timing on that?
Well, that's due in June.
And when's the immigration bill supposed to come to the floor?
I don't know. Right. The Supreme Court might beat the immigration bill. Who knows? But again, people on all sides are looking for the Supreme Court to be the solver of this so they don't have to go out on a limb.
Well, when it comes to money, the federal government is not waiting for the Defense of Marriage Act to be, rescinded. The Department of Education, actually, they're going to start this in the 2014-15 school year. When you do your student aid forms, if you have married same-sex parents, you're going to have to declare both of their incomes.
Excuse me, it is not about married. It's about any couples living together, married or unmarried, and that is how they're folding us into this.
Even if unmarried. But I think that stinks. I have to say, we don't have full rights, and they're starting to go after us on this kind of stuff
I will
when it
disagree
comes to
with you.
taking our money. So all I am alerting people, in a handful of cases, you know, when one parent doesn't work and the other does, it might help out in terms of your financial aid formula. But in most cases, you're going to have to pay more money, and we don't have equal rights.
The federal government in the Obama administration has made a lot of advances towards including same-sex couples in various regulations, in various departments, folding in people for benefits in ways that they can maneuver this. And I think this is a step toward equality. The major LGBT organizations have applauded this move, and it has expanded to opposite-sex couples living together. And I understand the immediate reaction of saying, wait a minute, you're not being fair to us. But I think this is just the same incremental step forward. It just happens to be one that has mixed results for us.
Okay. In the meantime, the Texas Attorney General has opined, he says, this is just my opinion, that local governments cannot give domestic partner benefits to their employees.
A number of major cities in Texas do this already, and a school district in a small town in Texas was the first to say they were going to give domestic partner benefits, and someone asked the Attorney General for his opinion, and his response was that this violates the Texas state constitutional amendment against same-sex marriage.
So I imagine somebody would have to take them to court if they wanted to stop it.
Well, yes, they would, because this is just an advisory opinion by him and not enforceable as anything. Congratulations to Colorado, where civil unions officially went into effect on May 1st. And
at midnight.
Moments after midnight, people were getting civilly unioned by the mayor of Denver and other officials as a new foot of snow was falling in Denver. And so that's
nice.
That's a nice
So there were
step.
white weddings.
Yes, they were.
They're not. Well, you could call them weddings.
Well,
it's not a
no,
marriage.
you don't want to call them weddings. You want to call them civil unions.
That's what they are.
In Oregon, the Ninth Circuit Federal District Court, which covers California, where they heard the Prop 8 case, and Oregon and several other states.
Hawaii.
Yeah, and Washington too, I think. Says that the Oregon state constitutional amendment against marriage and the United States ban on federal recognition of marriage are unconstitutional. This is the case of a lesbian couple who got married in Canada, came back to Oregon. One of them is a federal employee, and she applied for health benefits for her partner and was rejected by the federal government, and took them to court, and the court says, you're right, and the feds are wrong. But again, this all is awaiting judgment by the Supreme Court on the DOMA case and the Prop 8 case.
I just want to say to that couple, don't worry, because you will have to pay an equal amount on the student loans for your kid.
Both your incomes will be taken into consideration.
Let's stay in the North.
Look, we have slid under the radar for years by
because we didn't have equal rights.
Yeah.
And that's so fine if everybody.
Reparations.
Yeah. Yes, I believe in reparative therapy for gays.
I believe in
sense.
reparations, but
in that sense, reparations.
Well.
The
meanwhile, Basic Rights Oregon, the gay rights bill group, is collecting signatures for a 2014 vote on a referendum to repeal the state constitution.
Because it's unlikely the Supreme Court's going to get rid of those. Now, the Boeing Company, staying in the great Northwest, is extending pension and retirement plans to same-sex partners, not just married couples, but domestic partners and things like that of their employees.
That's a reversal of their opinion of a few months ago that people got outraged about, and so they have caved into public opinion. The quirkiest proposal of the week comes in Iowa, where state representatives there have passed a bill. You may remember, I will insert parenthetically, that Iowa legalized same-sex marriage by a unanimous vote of their Supreme Court.
7-0.
And the voters, in their wisdom, then threw 3 members of the court out of office. 4 remain. And the state representatives are proposing that if the state succeeds in passing a constitutional amendment against same-sex marriage to now outlaw it, take away the right that the court gave same-sex couples, should that pass, then the justices who remain on the court who were part of that decision get their pay cut 80%.
But not the new ones who didn't commit such a sin.
Well, what's truly ridiculous...
It's a novel approach
to
but
even
the separation of powers in the United States.
Beyond the hideousness of this, it is also illogical, because the state constitutional amendment did not exist when they made the decision. Right. So it's not as if they ruled against the constitutional amendment.
But they... Well. Now, George Bush, the most recent George Bush, was asked by Charlie Rose about his support for constitutional marriage for same-sex marriage in the context of his opening his new library. He dodged it. I'm not weighing in on these issues because I made a decision to get off the stage, along with Jeremy Irons.
Except for my painting.
Anyway.
My painting.
I guess he's concerned about his marketability on the
art
lecture
market.
Circuit. Oh, the art market, yeah. That's right, them artists, a lot of gays.
I don't know that he's doing that much lecturing either.
He does speaking engagements and picks up pretty penny, sure.
Yeah, I'm sure he would. The mayors of Fayetteville, Arkansas and Salina, Kansas have joined Mayors for Freedom to Marry. They're now up to about 360 from 35 states. That's a good thing.
Okay.
And how about that Rockville Center Bishop, William Murphy?
Oh, This is disgusting.
Well, you remember the guy who was a lay worker in the church there and
Nicholas Coppola.
out gay, but then married his partner.
So he was stripped of all his duties at the parish, and
So everyone got outraged.
18,000 signatures were sent to Bishop William Murphy protesting the ouster, and he sent them back with a one-line statement. One line, from your faithful bishop. What a pig. What a pig.
Sent them back.
God.
Couldn't he even use them for scrap paper or something?
Look, the whole thing just threatens their power. The whole stupid system. And I have to say, when are Catholics going to wake up, start electing your own bishops?
Mm-hmm. Well, we heard from a viewer who spoke up very forcefully against someone who was trying to talk to her on the street about soliciting something, and she objected. That was great. The Santa Fe, New Mexico City Council passed a resolution in favor of opening up marriage to same-sex couples, and there was an overflow crowd there for this who applauded and were, there's a huge, huge support for that.
So let's get on to the story of the week.
Ooh, Mr. Jared Collins.
Jason.
Jason
Collins.
It's his brother who's Jaron.
Right.
Yeah, Jason.
Who now says it's all a little surreal, his coming out. This is, again, the first player on a male major sport, if they count the 4 major sports as hockey, football, baseball, and basketball, which is what he plays for the Washington Wizards and about 5 other teams over the years, right?
Yes, in 6 teams in 12 years. There he is in his Celtics uniform. And it was when he went to play for the Celtics that he adopted that number on his uniform of 98. I don't know if we can put that picture up again. But he
was thinking of 8 for Prop 8, but then he went to 98, which was the year that Matthew Shepard was killed. That's what the symbolism was for him. Of course, he didn't tell anybody.
No.
So we didn't know.
No.
But it meant something to him.
And Judy Shepard, Matthew's mother, says she's quite touched by his tribute. But to me, the interesting thing about this story, and I'm sure to you too and to all our viewers, is the coverage of it, the reactions. He's
the President of the United States and the First Lady are sending
the
props
President
to
called him. President called him directly.
He played on one or another team in one or another of Obama's hometowns. Chicago, I think.
The Bulls, really?
Well, I don't know. I mean, but it was anyway.
Anyway,
but
almost everyone is reacting positively.
The Boston Red Sox tweeted, anytime you want to throw out the first pitch, let us know, because he used to play for the Celtics.
Right.
His teammates at the Wizards are proud of him, at least Bradley Beal and Garrett Temple.
Bryant.
Well, Kobe Bryant, let's read what Kobe Bryant said. Don't suffocate who you are because of the ignorance of others. And the ignorance of others was also on display. There was that ESPN commentator who went on a Christian rant.
Yeah, but you know what? I think Jason opened himself up to that.
Why?
Because Jason,
he said he's a big Christian.
Yes, and he said he did this coming out in an article in Sports Illustrated.
Which you can read online.
It is the May 6th edition of Sports Illustrated, and it's a big, huge thing. And he does describe himself as a devoted Christian. And so the jerk on ESPN, who is a regular commentator there and covers NBA basketball, replied to that by saying, I don't think he's a Christian because my reading of the Bible is that homosexuality is sinful and disgusting and you're in open rebellion to God and Jesus Christ. And everybody crashed down on his head, and ESPN said this doesn't represent our views, all of which is fine. But
you can't get around what's written in the Bible.
Look, I'm not supporting that. But I think that Jason invited that dialogue.
Okay. Well, I mean, the core of his message, and he said it basically in a redundant statement, I want to be genuine and authentic and truthful. And the first person he came out to in his family was his Aunt Terry, who's a judge in San Francisco, and she said, I've known you're gay for years. He said he was inspired by his Stanford roommate, Joe Kennedy III, now a congressman who marched in pride parades. And he has an Uncle Mark in New York who's gay.
Well, he says he got jealous of Joe Kennedy because Joe Kennedy marched in the Boston Pride Parade last summer. And he said, how can my straight roommate be marching and I'm here silent and I can't say anything? And that started him really thinking.
Most shocking about the story is that he's got a twin brother who said he didn't know that the guy was gay.
Until last year when he told him.
Yeah.
Hey, he had a fiancée who didn't know he was gay, too.
Well,
and they broke up 3 years ago.
Always the last
And she
to know.
didn't know until he told her just before this article came out. They had a very interesting discussion of that on The View this week.
Yes?
Because one of the View panelists said, well, I don't get it. You know, how could she not know? And how could he not tell her? And isn't that unfair? And blah, blah, blah. And everyone sat there and said, you know, people don't always come to terms with themselves immediately. And he may have believed that really he could be straight and this other feeling wasn't real. And it wasn't that he was lying to her. He was just trying to be who he thought he should be. Well, and it was a very sophisticated conversation, which is very unusual on these topics at The View. Well, and I was proud of that and happy to see that.
Let's see if he gets that Nike contract that said was supposed to go as a prize to the first one who came out. Of course, the question
first he has to get a job.
That's right. Well, I mean, when does his contract end?
Well, it's ended. He's finished the
over.
season, and he's a free agent. And he's 34 years old, and he's known as a very good defensive player as a center. He's 7 feet tall, and he's had a very good record, but he has been on 6 teams in 12 years, and that is not because he's a superstar.
We could have him on here to do color commentary.
He
could say, and goes for the score. You know.
We could sit on each other's shoulders and not be as tall as him.
We'll adjust the seats.
But there is a real question about whether he really still is an active player because he doesn't have a job and he is.
So what are we making? Why are we talking about this?
Well, because people are desperate.
When we talked about John Amici when he came out after his pro career.
But that's the whole point. Jason Collins has been singled out as different from all these people who came out before, all the men who came out before, because he's an active player of one of the big 4 leagues.
Martina Navratilova on the Today Show said, welcome to the club. I've been doing this for 31 years.
Ditto Billie Jean King.
Well,
and Renee Richards before them as an out transgender, transsexual tennis player.
Right.
Now, you know, how quickly we forget.
Now, the sports world made a lot of comments, including Mike Wallace of the Miami Dolphins, who said, oh, these beautiful women in the world, and guys want to mess with other guys. His apology came out in 10 seconds. Up. Dolphin said it's not acceptable. I don't know what I was talking about.
Look, he said, I don't understand homosexuality.
Oh, well.
We would be happy to explain it to him. But it wasn't a mean comment on his part. It wasn't, I hate Jason Collins. It was, I don't get it.
Well, I
thought it was an honest comment.
I had a colleague, a non-gay colleague at one of my jobs, and he said, gay men don't bother me. More for me. More for me is what he said.
Exactly. Actually, my favorite reaction was by a 22-year-old sports writer in Canada who came out in reaction to this. And he, I think, put it best when he said, I'm tired of putting on the charade of being straight.
Sure.
And that's
we decided that a long time ago.
He's 22.
Yeah.
He came out before I did.
Well,
in that sense.
But in a different era.
Yes, in a very different era.
We could talk about the 8th graders who want to form a gay-straight alliance in Lake County, Florida.
Exactly.
The county school district won't do it, so they're being sued.
But we're happy for Jason. If you read the descriptions of his process, it's all about how scared he was and how long it took him and how, you know, he had a personal trainer who was gay who he came out to who said to him, you really can't live this way. You have to tell someone. You have to get support from your family. You have to talk about
Well, actually,
this.
the thing that actually did it for him was when they had the strike in the NBA season. And he said, I was discombobulated. I didn't have my regular schedule, and it gave me time to think, and this is what made me want to do this.
But even with all the talk, even as far as we've come, even with him having a gay uncle, even with everything, he talks about how scared he was and how long it took him. And I maintain that it is still an individual decision by people who feel they're in isolation, no matter how many people they have around them. And it's the fear of assuming minority status. It is the fear of being criticized.
So how long do you think before we have a majority gay team?
Or until the majority of the population admits some degree of same-sex attraction.
Well, anyway.
To me, the overwhelming news value of this, the desperate need of the news media to talk about this and to put it all over everywhere and to celebrate this as a big deal, and the positive reactions across the board are the real thing to look at here.
All right.
Interesting.
Now, some of this might be helped along if we could pass the Employment Non-Discrimination Act in Congress, which was reintroduced. But the headline about this reintroduction is that there is this broad religious exemption that could include things like hospitals and colleges. So the civil liberties groups, ACLU, Lambda, NCLR, Trans Law, everybody are calling it unprecedented. We've got to get rid of this thing.
Too broad. Goes beyond churches.
They've got to stop this.
Could include hospitals and universities.
Yeah.
And of course, the religious groups, on the other hand, are still whining that they need more protections.
You give them an inch, they take a mile. They've already got tax exemptions, so we're all supporting them.
Yeah.
All right.
But meanwhile, Vermont has become the fourth state, plus the District of Columbia, to order insurance companies to cover medically necessary care for transgender people.
Yeah, and Philadelphia, the city council passed a bill to, one, give tax credits to businesses that offer health plans that cover same-sex partners and children, but not to those who are already doing it. Which is like, have city health plans ban discrimination versus transgender employees, and tax credits for companies with health plans covering trans health needs, and then the gender-neutral bathrooms, which we talked about last week.
And there was a very interesting article that a viewer passed along to us that quotes some of the activists currently in Philadelphia, giving a lot of credit to previous generations of activists, and specifically to 1975, when there was an effort to pass a non-discrimination bill, and there was a demonstration at City Hall, and there were some lesbian activists who were part of it, and the cops went right around all the gay men and just beat the hell out of those lesbians, dragged them down the stairs, beating them. And
what's that about? Less for them.
Must I explain? But it's a very moving tribute to those women. And it's nice to see current day activists be cognizant of what shoulders they stand on.
Absolutely. Staying in Philadelphia for a second, the Equality Forum is the big conference that's taking place down there right now. And originally, the State Department blocked Mariela Castro of Cuba, the daughter of the president, for coming to the conference and speaking. They only want to let her in for UN stuff. But this was reversed by the end of the week. She leads efforts there on AIDS and LGBT rights, even though I don't believe she herself is
no, and she's been very famous. She leads a sex education council, but she also supports the current government, so there's some mixed feelings about her,
right.
But it's nice that the
She's trying to bring them along.
And staying in Pennsylvania, in York, Pennsylvania, the principal of a high school there, Red Lion High School, tried to keep a transgender male student, Isaac Wolf, from running for prom king. The principal moved him, without any consultation with anyone, to the prom queen part of the ballot on the grounds that he was originally female.
This comes up in, when you're categorizing people for Tony voting as well.
More about that later. But then the principal backed down a little, and I don't know what the result of the prom royalty vote was, but he did allow Isaac to come to the prom with his date.
Well, of course, the worst absolute news in transgender news is what happened to the murder of Cece Dove, also known as Semia Akoff, a trans woman, 20, brutally murdered there in a Cleveland suburb in Olmsted Township. Body was found April 17th. But the other big part of the story is that the Cleveland Plain Dealer really handled the story abominably.
Terrible.
And they're going to have a meeting with the activists. I mean, Monica Roberts of Trans Griot called the articles a journalistic hate crime. And they did things like list her arrest record of the victim.
Yeah.
You see.
And
that kind of
refer to
stuff.
her as him and the
It.
body as it, and terrible stuff.
Right.
Now, in New York State, we have been trying for many years to pass a gender identity and expression non-discrimination bill, having passed the sexual orientation non-discrimination bill some years ago without including the gender identity and expression part. So once again, as happens historically here, the New York State Assembly has passed the gender bill, 84-46, but it now has to get through the Senate, where it has gone to die year after year after year.
Well, even though Democrats won a majority this year in the New York State Senate, there were defecting Democrats who allied themselves with Republicans with the blessing of Governor Cuomo, who's a supposed Democrat, and we don't know if they're going to make a deal on this.
With the mixed group now in charge, a few Democrats and all the Republicans, we have no idea what's going to happen.
Also,
this year.
without much fanfare.
But you can contact the Pride Agenda, Empire State Pride Agenda, if you want to get involved in continuing to work on passage of this gender bill. PrideAgenda.org.
And I didn't see that Pride Agenda put this on their agenda, which is the new bill to ban conversion therapy.
Yes.
There's one that passed in California that's working its way through the courts, the constitutionality of it. There's one in New Jersey, and now there's one in New York. But again, it was introduced kind of without fanfare.
It's another one that says no conversion therapy for minors.
Right.
Adults can choose to do that if they wish, but
My
minors,
friend
no.
George Weinberg, who wrote Society and the Healthy Homosexual, says they should just ban it entirely. And Jack Drescher, who's a very prominent out gay therapist, a psychiatrist, has come out now. Originally, he was very nervous about this kind of legislation. Now he's for it.
Okay.
I mean, he was always against the practice, but he was worried about legislation.
Now, I am not happy about what's going on in San Francisco around Pride. Here's the deal. They have a system in San Francisco for the annual Pride March in terms of choosing grand marshals.
They have an electoral college
Of previous grand marshals who vote for the next grand marshal.
Nice system, because you kind of get some of the top activists among those people.
Well, I have to say, as a former grand marshal myself of the New York Parade, where I rented a horse to ride down Fifth Avenue, I have not been consulted on subsequent grand marshals.
But here's the point. They picked Bradley Manning, who's in jail. He's the WikiLeaks hero. And, you know, martyr.
The Army private, known as either...
There's a picture of him at a gay rights demonstration, Bradley Manning, years ago.
Yes.
Standing up as if you don't think he doesn't have any credentials in this area.
Right.
And, of course, I think a lot of the mistreatment of him in prison has had a lot to do with him being gay and transgender.
Right. His identity is not entirely clarified at this point, but certainly he comes off as...
They won't let him on the show.
This show, or any show. And he's been held in solitary confinement. He's been forced to be naked all the time. He's been abused. He's been... the government is trying to prosecute him for endangering military people and State Department people and CIA people all over the world.
None of which has been proven.
None of which has happened.
This stuff was published in the New York Times. Why don't you go after them?
Yes, and
Maybe they will.
Some of us who are old enough remember Daniel Ellsberg and the Pentagon Papers
and
how at a rally for Bradley Manning
in San Francisco,
and how important it is for us as citizens to speak up against the government. And as many have pointed out, the people putting U.S. soldiers at risk is the U.S. government.
Is George Bush and Barack Obama.
Sending them to these wars.
And Obama has been, I voted for him, he has been terrible on whistleblowers. They go after them instead of giving them prizes.
But now, even worse on whistleblowers is the San Francisco Pride Committee, which has immediately, you talk about the Miami Dolphins guy rescinding his comment in 10 seconds. I think it took Lisa Williams of the San Francisco Pride Committee 5 seconds to disempower the
This
Grand
woman
Marshal Committee.
from the Gay Shame Parade in San Francisco
Yeah.
said Bradley Manning's actions placed in harm's way the lives of our men and women in uniform, called him an insult to anyone who has ever served. On the other hand, the American Legion Post 315 called on Williams to resign.
Hallelujah.
Yeah.
It made me want to withdraw from the movement.
Absolutely. You know, we're together on something here.
Sometimes we disagree, sometimes we agree. On
Well,
this one, we agree.
I have signed a petition to make Bradley Manning a Grand Marshal in New York.
Absolutely.
Joining Edie Windsor and I think Harry Belafonte and somebody else.
I saw his picture.
I'm sorry if I'm not remembering the other person.
It is interesting and, to me, discouraging to see the comments on any website that has covered this controversy, because they are split right down the middle.
Yeah.
You can count them side by side, the number of people who are outraged that Bradley Manning was chosen to be a Grand Marshal, and the people who are outraged that he was then disallowed to be a Grand Marshal. But the idea that we have so abdicated our role as independent thinkers and you know, talk about loyal to the U.S. Whistleblowers are the ones who are loyal to the U.S., not these people.
And, of course, these pride committees are becoming more and more loyal to the corporations that fund them, who are part of the war machine.
Brilliant article by Glenn Greenwald on this, saying, you dare complain about Bradley Manning when you have parade sponsors like the Bank of America and Wells Fargo and all these banks that have been
destroying the world economy
and giving you know, screwing everyone in this country with these bad mortgages, running away with the money, refusing to be accountable, and they're okay as parade sponsors.
Right.
But Bradley Manning, who was trying to reveal the atrocities committed by the U.S. government, is not good enough for your parade.
I think they get our point.
I think you do.
And maybe here's something most of us who watch this show can agree on. What's going on in Washington State, where 12 Republicans, only 12, and they're not going anywhere, have introduced a bill to legalize discrimination against LGBT people based on sincerely held religious belief. The Attorney General there filed suit against something called Arlene's Flowers and Gifts in Richland, where the owner refused to provide flowers for a gay wedding, citing her relationship with Jesus Christ, who told her not to do this. Anyway, one constituent called a sponsor, and so Senator Mike Hewitt of Walla Walla asked a staffer what is a gay person in an isolated area supposed to do if the local gas and the local food outlets discriminate against him or her? And the staffer said, well, gay people can grow their own food. This reminds me of like what Rabbi Yehuda Levin said to me when I said, I mean, come on, you're protesting what bathroom transgendered people go into. What are they supposed to do? He said, wear diapers. I mean, you people are, but
these people should be tried for treason.
But this comment really brings home, suppose if you live in an isolated area, and they're going to discriminate against you, and they've got the right to do so, which they already do in many of these places, my goodness, you can be without a lot of services.
My goodness, that's as far as you'll go?
My goodness. My goodness. And,
on TV, yes.
And we are remembering, lest we forget, 60 years ago is when President Eisenhower issued an order purging the federal employees who were gay. It's called the Lavender Scare. It was seen as a security threat.
Coming soon to a movie theater or cable station near you, my pal Josh Howard, who's an old 60 Minutes producer, and Kevin Jennings, founder of GLSEN and former Assistant Secretary of the Department of Education, are making a film called The Lavender Scare.
And the problem with the making the film is that some of the people who are still around from those days
don't want to talk.
They don't want to talk, but some do.
Some do, and they got a lot of Frank Kameny before he died.
The American Family Association is squawking because the Defense Department blocked access to their website due to hostile content.
Thank God.
Also listed them as a domestic hate group. Now,
Yeah,
I have
well-
to say, I'm not crazy about the censorship.
Well, no, but this is because we complained that they were blocking access to our organization. So their answer evidently is not to open it to everybody, but to block others.
Now, is it
the Pentagon,
Yeah.
however, here's my rant against them. They conduct a National Day of Prayer.
All right.
The Pentagon conducts a National Day of Prayer.
In God we trust. All others pay cash.
Yeah, and one of the headliners this year is some guy named Pastor Greg Laurie.
He doesn't really like gay people, does he?
Not at all.
Now, speaking of religion, so is it progress that the Mormons are endorsing the plan to admit gay scouts? This is the one where you can't be a scout
Well-
leader, which is, of course, outrageous.
Yeah.
But the Mormons have come around on gay scouts. I mean, they used to excommunicate gay people.
I think it is just a smokescreen and unacceptable to do this as a halfway measure, which I would call not even halfway, where you are willing to tolerate gay scouts but not gay leaders.
Yeah.
So, the Mormon Church saying they're okay with it, I guess that's a signal that's going to go through. But to disallow gay leaders, I think, is just
Now, you might remember
unacceptable.
you might remember we passed a marriage equality in New York a couple of
I've
years
heard
ago.
that,
Now,
yes.
how do you feel about the fact that it's now been revealed that Governor Cuomo gave an awful lot of people nice jobs to make this bill pass in various departments, people who were not necessarily qualified for these positions?
Are you asking me to condemn politics in New York State?
Well, but Andrew has tried to hold himself up to a higher standard of, like,
please.
no corruption.
I didn't trust his father. I don't trust him.
Let's have him on the show.
Heck with them all.
Because he can't go on Fred Dicker's show anymore. That was his tribune.
Well, in upstate New York, how do you like Father Edward Salmon, president of McQuaid Jesuit High School, who says it's fine with him if two boys attend the junior ball as a couple.
Great.
They can't have sex,
Well,
but he's fine. He says them attending as a couple does not mean that he's endorsing sexuality. He's just, if they want to go together, it's okay.
I mean, even Cardinal O'Connor here in New York, who was a rank anti-gay bigot, when gay people would come up to communion en masse, he would give them communion. He said, I can't judge, them. They're not having sex in the aisles. They would He didn't say that.
No, but someone did on the Howard Stern show.
Oh, that's right. But they weren't
That
gay.
was a straight couple.
They weren't gay. And then, go ahead.
I was going to go to Robert Pinter and Mayor Bloomberg. Robert Pinter, who's been on this show, was one of the guys subject to a phony arrest in a porn video store in 2008.
A false arrest.
False arrest. He was in the store. A young, attractive guy approaches him and offers to pay him for sex.
And he's a little discombobulated by this, but he says, well, what happened first
He
was...
didn't
wait a
say
minute.
anything.
First, the guy just offered him sex.
Yes.
So they're leaving the store, and he says, I'll give you $50 to blow me. And Robert's like, what? You're going to pay me? First of all, I've struck gold, and now you're going to pay me? And all this kind of stuff?
But he didn't say anything.
He didn't say anything,
he
but
got
he left the
arrested.
store with him.
Yeah.
And he was surrounded by cops who he thought were just muggers who were trying to kill him. And anyway, he
And he
has
got
taken
arrested.
well, we found out that this was happening all along. What has been revealed this week
Is that Mayor Bloomberg's office, which had previously said they had no involvement with this, and this was an operation strictly thought up by the cops on their own to
because of complaints. Because of complaints of prostitution.
in the
No,
neighborhood.
it was complaints of, it was Bloomberg who wanted to shut down these things for real estate reasons.
Bloomberg's Office of Special Enforcement had called up the cops and told them to arrest someone
need another-
at this store.
We need another collar there. Well, what? I mean, he should be. That's the kind of thing he should be impeached over.
Absolutely.
Impeached. I'm not exaggerating, because I went to a press conference and asked Bloomberg about this many years ago.
Yeah.
And said, now, here's all the stats. Here's what's happening here. And he goes, well, I don't know what you're talking about. Then he's handed a note, and he starts, and he starts making a joke about. I said, all these men are average age 50. These prostitutes that you're arresting.
Yeah.
And whereas the average age elsewhere is about, 22.
18.
Well, 22, let's
Okay.
say. And he says, what are you saying about people who are 50? They couldn't be processed. I said, just answer my question. Have you looked at this pattern and what do you think about it?
Right.
Well, I don't know anything about it. Well, you're a liar and you should be impeached.
I agree.
We are in a rant this week, but this stuff is very upsetting.
It is upsetting.
I mean, they ruined a bunch of people's lives over this.
Yep.
A lot of them were tourists, folks. You come from around the country. Tourists who wandered into a porn shop and got arrested for prostitution, said, make a plea, pay a fine,
Right.
it'll go away. Robert Pincher's the only one who stood up.
Yep. And good for you, Robert, and thank you for doing that, and thank you for sticking with it and uncovering this. Not that it'll get us anywhere.
Okay.
And as previously referred to, the ACLU is now going to sue Lake County, Florida's school board because they have been blocking the attempts by Bailey Silberstein, 14 years old, to start a gay-straight alliance in her school. She's been working on this for 2 or 3 years, and they've done everything to disallow it, and the ACLU is now suing.
We always win these cases. So
Always.
if you want to have a gay-straight alliance in your school, you just tell the local ACLU, and they will get you one.
Yes. We told you last week that out gay Eric Fanning was going to be an undersecretary of the Air Force.
Well, he's going to be the acting secretary because the secretary is resigning.
Exactly.
That's like the biggest gay job there is.
And here's an unlikely thing. A bill has been introduced in the South Carolina legislature for a sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, non-discrimination bill. Want to take bets on that passing?
Someday.
Okay.
They'll get
International news?
Yes.
All right.
Well, the Northern Ireland voted on marriage equality. They didn't vote. They killed the bill. Basically, the unionists brought it down by calling on the power-sharing minister. It was a motion. All right, it didn't go through.
Yeah.
But it was because of the unionists.
And they will then
And
be
Amnesty International may sue over this to try to get marriage
yeah,
rights.
because they're also going to be the only part of the United Kingdom that does not have any kind of rights for same-sex couples. But in Colombia, in South America, the Senate there, by a vote of 51 to 17,
Whoops.
that's 3-1, rejected a same-sex marriage
But
bill.
they've got a constitutional court ruling there that says if the Senate fails to act to give same-sex couples equal rights by June 20th, they can register their unions anyway.
They'll have your perfect civil union idea.
Yeah, and in Iceland, the first out head of government has stepped down. Prime Minister Joanna, we'll call her.
Sigurdardóttir.
There you go. She's been there for 4 years. She's the one who took over after the crisis and did a nice job.
She was the first out gay prime minister in the world, and she did a good job, but there's some controversy, and that's why they kicked her party out of power. She just didn't run for re-election, but part of it was the writing on the wall. Because they've had an austerity approach, a lot of people are still out of work and don't have enough resources. So,
Well, that's not good.
Exactly,
Damn her.
exactly. The U.S. State Department has issued its annual report on the human rights situation in countries around the world. It talks about both good support of LGBT people and official governmental abuse of LGBT
We're having trouble
people
with
around
that
the world.
this week.
Hate crimes. If you go to humanrights.gov, you can get the annual State Department.
I mean, that's why
report.
we call the show Gay USA. It's easier to say.
In Belize, next week, May 7th through 10th, there is going to be a trial. Gay men there, or a gay man, is challenging the country's sodomy law. Now, Belize is thought of as a lovely vacation spot. A lot of gay people go there, but in fact, it is illegal to be gay in Belize.
In about 75 countries.
And there's a lot of thinking that they're not going to get very far with this lawsuit.
No, it's not
We'll
illegal to
see.
be gay. You can go to the prom, but you can't have sex.
You cannot. In South Africa, the story has surfaced of a camp that is set up for conversion therapy. 3 teenage boys were starved, tortured, had their arms broken,
To death in one
burned
case.
over their bodies. Just complete
Horror.
horrible, horrible torture. A general and an employee of the camp are on trial for murder, for child abuse, for neglect, for assault. They chain these boys to their beds. They refuse them access to toilets.
And it's essentially...
They made them eat their own feces.
It's essentially just for effeminacy.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
So it is a kind of a transgender issue.
Yes, it's about gender conformity.
Right. We'll make a man of you. We'll kill you.
And in suburban Beirut, Lebanon, a mayor there of that neighborhood ordered a raid on the local gay bar, which seemed to be quite popular. And the footage of it, it's a modern building in a nice neighborhood. It's now closed down. They arrested 6 people, both gay and transsexual or transgendered. 6 arrested, stripped naked in the police station, photographed, beaten.
Well, you know...
And the mayor says, we can't tolerate these half men, half women.
Well, this happened in New York over the years and within our movement lifetimes.
Yeah.
I mean, there were bars that were raided and people... I'm talking about, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
In New York.
Well, more intelligently, a high school in Stockholm, Sweden has opened some gender-neutral private changing rooms for anyone, transgender or otherwise, who feels uncomfortable in big locker rooms where gender stereotyping takes place. So these offer private spaces for people to use as changing rooms, and would be nice to... And it was suggested by the student council at the school, and the administrators said, okay, sounds good.
All right. In AIDS news,
Yep.
Let's start with the bad news. Well, it's news. A big vaccine trial has been halted. This was happening in 19 cities, started in 2009. 2,500 people were enrolled. It's called the HVTN 505 clinical trial. It was for men or transgender people who have sex with men. Half got the vaccine, half got the placebo. And those who got the vaccine got more infections than the people getting the placebo. So it also failed to reduce viral load. So that's the end of that.
Not working.
Right.
I'm sometimes accused of being too skeptical of these vaccine trials. I just think the science is so difficult, and the way these retroviruses work makes it unlikely to be able to create a vaccine that will not be gotten around by the virus.
Right.
But there were news reports this week that, we're right on the verge of a cure. We're finding things where we can...
One story in the Telegraph in the UK.
Yes. Well, a viewer sent this to me and said, look at this, look at this. They figured out how to get the HIV that's hiding in reservoirs to come out, and then we can attack it and get rid of it. But it has been debunked quite strenuously by...
Treatment Action Group, among others.
Yes, exactly. So watch out.
California's statistics show a drop in HIV diagnoses from around 6,200 in 2007 to around 4,000 in 2012, a 34% drop.
And something called the U.S. Preventative Services Task Force, which had previously recommended HIV testing for people at high risk, has come out with a new recommendation that everyone from age 15 to age 65 should be routinely tested for HIV, because they estimate that still 20% of the people who have it, and I think that may be a low estimate, don't know it. And as we see more and more that early treatment is really important for a number of things, it's more and more urgent to find everyone who has HIV and get them into treatment.
What if you're just going to the prom and not having sex?
Doesn't mean you don't have HIV.
Well, but you said routinely tested. So
yes, routinely tested.
What does that mean in terms of?
It means that as part of your regular, if you're going for a checkup annually, for instance, one of the things the doctor should be saying to you is, okay, let's give you an HIV test.
They often don't.
They really often don't. And what this also will mean is that insurance companies, private and public, will now start covering HIV tests without copays.
Oh,
so that's really good.
In Illinois, Illinois has a law that says if a student is HIV positive, the principal has to be notified, and he or she can tell anyone on the staff that they want.
Yeah.
So there's a Senate bill there, HB 61, which would repeal that. And San Francisco has finally moved to saying they will no longer use condoms as evidence when prosecuting sex workers. We're trying to change that law in New York as well.
Here's my fear, and maybe I'm being paranoid about this. The law enforcement offices have agreed not to use evidence of condom possession in prosecutions. I fear the cops will still be arresting people on the basis of carrying condoms.
And just saying something else.
Yes, finding other ways to bring evidence to prosecute them. This is just a little scenario in my own head because of my suspicions of the operations of the police force in these situations.
I would like to see us decriminalize prostitution.
I would too. That'll be next week's rant.
Okay.
All right. Entertainment news. Well, let's see. We have
about 5 minutes.
Yeah. Should we show?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Let's skip Tuke Watkins of Desperate Housewives sort of talked about being gay on the Marie Osmond talk show. We were going to show you that, but we don't have time.
Well, we'll talk about the Tony Awards. There's one gay winner already. Larry Kramer, who won last year for the revival of Normal Heart, is now being honored with the Isabel Stevenson Award for his humanitarian work.
Substantial contribution on behalf of humanitarian, social service, or charitable organizations.
But there's also a lot of, leading the nominations was Kinky Boots, which is about a drag queen that saves a shoe factory, has 12.
13.
All right, including Harvey
Matilda
Fierstein for
has
the
12.
book. All right, and Billy Porter for the lead in the musical, Nathan Lane for playing the Nance, a gay man, gay character.
David Hyde Pierce for Vanya, Sonia, Masha, and Spike.
Christopher Durang, who wrote that play, playwright Richard Greenberg.
Lots of gay nominations.
Well, Edward Albee for the revival of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. But I saw 3 shows this week, and including the crowd-pleasing revival of A Trip to Bountiful by Horton Foote.
Cicely Tyson.
Cuba Gooding Jr., Vanessa Williams, Condola Rashad. It's a little more sentimental than I remember the movie with Geraldine Page, but it's first rate. And then 2 shows heavily influenced by Harold Pinter. One of them was called, it's from part of the Brits Off-Broadway series, Mike Bartlett's Bull, which is his companion to Cock. It's sort of The Homecoming meets The Office. Got that?
Okay.
And it's a little disturbing how funny cruelty
Credits
can be.
Move to
And the
next.
Broadway revival of Orphans with Alec Baldwin and Tony-nominated Tom Sturridge and Ben Foster is also a menacing comedy and a good one to see.
Okay. No rants on the Tony nominations. No. We saved that for the politics. And we will see you next week.